Welcome to the Unplug podcast. Hello, Paul Hawken.
Good morning, Susie. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm so happy to have you on the Unplug podcast and to also talk about your book, Regeneration. Now, I want to say that the subtitle of this book is very sexy: Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. That's a huge undertaking. So I decided that maybe the most interesting thing for anyone listening to this would be to hear just how we can do that as a collective.
Yeah, I mean, how is really about changing our direction and the rate we're going where we need to go. I mean, the crisis is that we're going the wrong direction. Things on all levels of impact are worsening, and the amount of human activity directed to it is inadequate to the task at hand, which is to reverse global warming over the next 30 years to actually, stop the emission of greenhouse gases and bring them back home. I mean, that's what we have to do. But what we're doing instead is actually accelerating the emissions of greenhouse gases and the degradation of terrestrial and oceanic landscapes and bodies of water that are also causing emissions of greenhouse gases. So ending the climate crisis in one generation means that we have changed our direction, pivoted, if you will, and are undertaking activity that is taking us in the right direction at a rate that makes sense in terms of what we have to do over the next 30, 40 years. And so one generation is ambiguous. Does that mean 10 years? Does it mean 20 years? Does it mean, I don't know. Usually a generation is 20 years. But the crisis, Susie, is the realization that we're not doing anything really. We are, but I mean, it's so insufficient and inadequate to the task at hand. And so the crisis is an internal crisis as well, which is we feel despair, anxiety, eco-anxiety, worry. We check out, we build bunkers like Bill Gates, he won't talk about it, but, rich people building bunkers to survive. Are they kidding? I mean, it's like, don't step outside the bunker. I mean, this idea that somehow, we can protect ourselves or our community or our place or our little, where we live on Earth is just not true. I mean, we're in this together. And so, and what we lack right now, of course, is that sense of togetherness, that sense of community, that sense of connection, that sense of let's do it. And so, that's where the title and the subtitle come from.
How do we cultivate and create a movement, the Let's Do It movement, to actually make change happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the question that we should be asking ourselves, and everybody should be asking. I think that if we look back and all the way up to today, what you see or what you experience is the individuation of responsibility on one hand. And that actually came out of the tobacco playbook way back. It was picked up by Ogilvy and Mather at British Petroleum in 2001. And basically it was this idea that you had a carbon footprint, which you do, and you can measure it. And that if you measure it, then you could take those actions that would reduce it. And the underlying psychology of that was that we are just an oil company. We just, drill holes in the ground and make gasoline out of petroleum, and you're driving, so, I mean, so you can do something, and we're just serving you, we're innocent in a sense. And that individuation of responsibility took really. And so you had, so many things you could do to save the earth, and, lists that, recycle your plastic, use cold water in your washing machine, Eat Smart, that was a good one. These are things that came out of the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Suzuki Foundation, and other things, put a power strip in your home entertainment center. I love that one. It's like, I don't have a home entertainment center, I mean, they were just so, what's the word? They were right. I mean, in the sense, you should use cold water, you should use the right detergents, you should recycle, you should eat smart, you should move closer to work. That was an interesting one pre-COVID. I mean, change your car. All these things were really, yes, good idea, but anybody who did them knew that they were inadequate to the task at hand. In other words, they're going, okay, I'll do this, but shoot, I'm reading the newspaper, I'm reading, what's going on, I'm watching documentaries and looking at the newscasts and so forth. In more people drowned in New Jersey than Louisiana from Hurricane Ida. How did that happen? I mean, these such anomalous events are occurring that are the result of the increasing impact of global warming on climate. And so what happened is individuals then look to policy. They look to big government. They look to the Conference of the Parties, which is the United Nations Framework on Climate Change meeting that happens once every year. This is the 26th time. It starts the last day of October and the first week of November in Glasgow, Scotland. And then our big governments, our own, like the Biden administration or the Trump versus Biden administration, and so then we kind of look away to hopefully then we, in a sense, third person, the responsibility and the hope we may have for action. And I think it's fair to say that not much has happened in the last few decades, and it's not that the people aren't sincere, that there's caring people and NGOs and certain politicians that are very well informed and do understand that. Of course there are, but collectively, the things getting worse. And so what's missing in all that is your question, like, so, well, how do we? And the question is, who are we? And that's the interesting thing, because really, who are we? And what's actually missing in the conversation is we. In the sense, there's I, that's the individuated Paul Hawken or Susie, who has to do something, Susie, it's like, okay, I'll do it, what? And then the other, the they, on these very, high positions or, levers of power that they control these people, that are way beyond our ken, so to speak. And well, yeah, but what about the rest of us? And so regeneration is very much about that sort of middle ground. Maybe middle isn't the right word, but the point is that everyone else, because 98% of the world is disengaged, they aren't doing anything at all. And half of those people, approximately, depending on the country, actually do understand the problem. They get it. And they're sympathetic to it, empathic even, and still they don't do anything. And so I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves, is how do we get into a situation where, we're facing the most serious crisis that civilization has ever faced and may ever, I hope, and not do anything, and have the bulk of humanity totally disengaged. And you could easily, blame, others, for their inactivity, but I don't. I actually go sort of upstream and say, how did we do that? And again, this collective, we know the science, we've known it for a long time. All the predictions that came out in the 70s, the 80s, and 90s from Ralph Cicerone and UCI, University of California, Irvine, and others and so forth have been spot on. I mean, they haven't missed one thing. In fact, if anything, where they've missed is that the impacts have been more severe than they had anticipated, but not the level of impact. And so that's what regeneration tries to address, really, is why did we miss the boat on this one?
And even though we, so to speak, have missed the boat so far, I think that this book actually does help people start a conversation. I mean, we're having one now. I've seen you have conversations with unbelievable human beings. And I feel like if we don't do anything at this point, it's just going to continue to spike all of the problems. But we can't afford as a society to pay for all these natural disasters. And I think that that's going to be the thing that probably accelerates the change on a governmental basis. The fact that it's now starting to cost governments so much to try to help humans survive all of these natural disasters caused, in essence, by humans. And one of the things you mentioned, Paul, was the electrification being a way to kind of move away from what is to what could be. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, electrify everything is the term I use. It's really based on Saul Griffith's work, an Australian physicist, and he has calculated. In fact, he has a book that I think came out yesterday called Electrify by MIT Press. But that basically what we are in the process of doing, actually, it's interesting. It's not like we should do this. We are doing it. But everything that is powered by coal, gas, and oil is going to be powered by electricity. And the acceleration of that has a huge impact in terms of reducing greenhouse gases from the combustion of coal, gas, and oil. And particularly if the source of electricity must be renewable energy, that is solar and wind. And if that change out, that swapping out of the source of power does two things. One is obviously renewable energy does not have the same impact in terms of greenhouse gases. It has some, you make steel, you create things, you're manufacturing solar panels and wind turbines. For sure, it has some impact, but it's very de minimis compared to the combustion of fossil fuels. But more importantly, that when you convert, say, you live somewhere and you're using heating oil or natural gas, okay, to heat your water, heat your home. When you convert to a heat pump, that is, you use electricity to perform those functions and so forth, you use half as much energy. It can vary according to latitude, and it can be 40%, it can be more than 50%, but there's a big reduction in the amount of energy and then the source of energy, and so it's a twofer in that way. It's much more effective, and so I would say that it is probably, from the perspective of greenhouse gases, it's probably the number one solution that we can do. And the thing about it is, each householder can do it. Now, most can't because they can't afford it. Now, this is interesting, but most people can't afford their house for cash either. So we need to create financing mechanisms where people can get heat pumps installed and get induction stoves too, for cooking, so that they're not poisoning themselves with natural gas. But they pay for themselves in the savings. And so we should be able to just go down to our, savings and loan or bank or whatever, and just say, here, I'm putting in my heat pump, I'm, swapping out that for natural gas. And so here, we'll pay for it. And then you pay for it every month, but you pay for it out of the savings. And it should be falling off a log, that simple, that easy. And it is in some places, it just isn't here.
You mentioned that you were bringing your neighborhood, you were doing it to your own home, and that people in your neighborhood were starting to do that. How are you kind of spreading it organically around you?
I understood the mechanism of heat pumps. Basically, they're an air conditioner running backwards. What does a refrigerator do? It compresses gases. That's the compressor. That's the noise you hear. And then expands them. When something expands, it creates cooling. And so anybody who's been around a refrigerator knows that in the back of the refrigerator it's really hot, and inside it's cold or frozen. So it's taking ambient air in the home and then splitting it out and so forth, by extracting the heat from it, then it goes colder, taking the heat out of it. Well, a heat pump takes the heat out of ambient air, or the ground, actually, it can be ground source heat pumps and so forth. and it takes the heat out and then heats water, heats a hydronic system or forced air system for heating. And it's the same mechanism as an air conditioner. The only difference is the plumbing, really. And because you're using air or water and so forth to heat, water for hot water, obviously, but air for forced air, or water for hydronic systems. So, but it's very straightforward. This is not rocket science, at all. And it's just that we've been very slow to pick it up in this country. So when I started looking at it from my own home, I started talking to my friends, my neighbors. This has sort of been a guy thing, because I'm in a sense, how does it work? All that sort of stuff. And getting them interested, and also sharing with them that I really didn't know really how to get it done. I mean, the thing, I live in Marin County in north of San Francisco, and really there's nobody in this county that understands how to do it. I mean, the plumber's going, nah, we don't do that. And, and so it's been a process of discovering, who can do it out of county. At the same time, I'm working with a contractor and some others and saying, listen, work with me to learn how to do it. And then as other people want to do it, then you'll get business. In other words, get on the learning curve here. And so that is really what I'm trying to do with my neighbors, because I know them and they're next door, and I can talk to them. But that's what regeneration.org is trying to do as a website for the whole world and so forth. Not that we can teach the world, we can't do it all, but we can create the mechanisms where people can come together, share knowledge, work together, create learning pods. And that is, we think, and remember I said earlier, talk about we, where's the we in all this? The humanity, we're Homo sapiens, okay? We haven't been around that long, but one of the reasons we're here and not Neanderthals or Homo floresiensis or other types of hominids is because we were social and we actually worked together. And that's who we are. We love to learn together. We love to solve problems together. We love to play together. We love to worship together. I mean, this is Homo sapiens. And so when we look at the climate crisis, what is left out is this incredible, beautiful quality of Homo sapiens and so forth. If you individuate it, then you feel guilt, or you feel shame, or you feel like, oh my God, I should do this. You feel badly. And you also feel that, like I said, unless you have an IQ lower than room temperature, you know that this isn't going to solve the problem. And yet it's very relevant too. This doesn't mean it's irrelevant, and so this is exactly what we're trying to create in Regeneration, that idea that each of you, that is each of you who thinks you're an individual, is actually a we. Mm-hmm. And you're a we because of Unplug. I mean, for many, many other reasons, by the way, in terms of, your social sphere, your friends, I don't know where I don't know your life, but I mean, the fact is, like everybody, you have friends and family and neighbors and networks and maybe companies or maybe churches, mosques, temples, synagogues, whatever it is, all these different things, clubs, you play bridge, you play soccer, you're on the PTA committee, whatever. All these things are part of people's networks, and these networks are who we are. Actually, we don't live in isolation, and we may have done so more so in COVID, and we know how that worked out. It was very depressing for people, very, very, very depressing, because it broke a fundamental connection that we have, and that we need and that we thrive upon. And so the climate crisis is begging for us to get involved, in a way that's meaningful to us, that benefits us, frankly. Like heat pumps is a benefit to you, it's a benefit to the world, it's a benefit to, the future, and to understand that the dynamics of reversing global warming and addressing the climate crisis is actually one that has cascading benefits for the world, for our future children, for the, not our children exist right now, but their children, for the people who exist right now, for those who are impoverished and poor. I mean, you name it. And the solutions to reversing global warming have extraordinarily beneficial impacts upon the world.
Your Regeneration website is definitely robust. In fact, I was thinking maybe I should share it. How do you feel about that if I share it?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share it since we are in video.
Yeah.
Here it is. It's such a beautiful website.
Yeah.
And this is a great place. I mean, obviously the book is gorgeous and the book has so much. Here's the picture of the book, Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. I love how you simplify so many things in there. And you talk about blue carbon and green carbon. And for someone who doesn't know a lot about global warming, it was definitely an education in a very small book. But this is where we want to go when we want to actually join the collective and see all these different things. Like, where should we go here on your website?
Yeah, Nexus is what we say is the difference between this and my previous book, Drawdown, is that this is a how to get it done book. This is the do book. This is like, there's an interesting thing, Susie, Andrew Huberman's work at Stanford. He's a neurobiologist and neuroscientist. And we have this idea that if we believe something, it changes who we are, what we do, and it changes our actions and so forth. He says, that's actually not true. It's our actions change our beliefs. And so one of the things I think a lot of people, and I can get that too, you get mired in and get depressed by the numbers, the facts, what's going on, what you're seeing, the lack of involvement, all that sort of stuff. And the fact is that when you're doing something, as opposed to, pondering it or worrying about it, it changes who you are. It changes your spirit, your heart, your sense of optimism, your respect for other people, your sense of involvement, your sense of self-worth, your sense of connectedness, when you act. And so this book is very much about, come on, let's get it done, and this is what you can do. And so when you go to these and it's not complete yet and so forth, and then what you get is a list of all the things that you can do on different levels of agency. If you're just as an individual, this is what you can do, this is what you can do as a neighborhood, as a community, as a city, as a company, as groups, et cetera, depending on what the solution is. And this is what you can influence. These are the people you can support, the NGOs that are amazing. This is where you can learn, and you can learn more. This is where you can get involved, and with the people, other groups who want your involvement and so forth. And these are the politicians and the policies and so forth that you can influence. And with letters or emails, or this is who to send the email to. It's like, and here's their phone number. And so it's a action kit, for everybody all over the world, and we'll be translating it too eventually, maybe not so eventually, but as soon as possible. But right now, it as much as possibly applies to the whole of the world. Yeah.
This website is so exciting because you just open it up and you just want to dive into every single section. And I do believe that obviously the tiny changes are happening, and they're going to be accelerated because of need, just basic need. But also it's each little section is starting to be made a little bit sexier. Like, for instance, I went to a runway show last weekend, and it was by a designer named Greg Lauren, who's Ralph Lauren's nephew. And it was just the most incredible clothing, all made from other clothing, patched together. And I do think to be able to do that and reinvent what already exists is going to be kind of the new trend, and something that we're going to be seeing a lot of just in the clothing industry, because we don't really need to be making fast fashion anymore when there's so much out there already.
Yeah. And how did it get fast? That is so interesting. When we had 4 seasons or 2 seasons or whatever, now 52 seasons. I mean, clothing became disposable. and you could buy things for, a few dollars, like a blouse for $8, whatever. And then, but it's flimsy. It wasn't made well. It was made because an influencer wore it, or something therein. And so what Greg Lauren and others are doing is doing what Eileen Fisher has been doing actually for quite a long time and so forth, but really taking responsibility for the whole supply chain for her customers. And so you're seeing, I mean, the clothing industry is definitely in a panic, actually, especially, and, and all these companies, that really have literally 747s flying out every week around the world to deliver clothing to their stores, because they don't, it's new, and instead of building a company that creates clothing that endures and lasts, that you want to wear. I have, it's the one that made of plastic, actually. Come to think of it, but it's very warm and it's blue, and it's been to Patagonia, it's been to Alaska, it's been to Burma, it's been to the Tibetan Plateau, it's been to Namibia. I can go on. It's been to Greenland, north of Greenland, to the North Indian Ice Research Station, and so forth. I mean, it's 30. I don't know. I'm 35 years old. And it's like I treasure it. I mean, I put it on, and it's like, yeah, and so we lost that 8 to 10% of emissions are from the clothing industry. It's the second most polluting industry in the world. And when I was writing about the clothing industry and regeneration, because there are some really good actors out there now, Sway in Los Angeles, I mean, she's doing amazing things, and there's companies popping up and companies are changing their practices. But I calculated what the garment worker was making, or the textile worker, in 1800. And this is when we were talking about the dark satanic Hobson mills, and men were paid a penny an hour, and women were paid a halfpenny, half as much, and children were paying a quarter penny. And usually the whole family had to work or they couldn't survive. And so they're all there 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and no time to do anything else, except work. Okay, they're paying a penny an hour. That was pegged to silver, the price of silver and gold at that time, the English currency. And so we know what that is in constant dollars today. And in constant dollars, they were being paid 35 cents an hour, okay, at that time. And today, the average wage, and I kid you not, in the world for garment workers is 35 cents an hour. Wow. So in 221 years, it's 220 years of exploitation, of deracination, of horrific conditions, frankly, for mostly women now, mostly men then. And that is behind our clothing industry. And that is when you go and see a rack of clothing, wherever you see it, whether it's cheap or not, or more expensive, is underneath all that is suffering, human suffering, and pollution and exploitation of the planet. And 25% of all pesticides are used on cotton. I mean, of all the pesticides used on an annual basis, and they're toxic. And so when you buy clothing, it's a big deal, and who made it? Where do you get it from? Is it secondhand? Is it like patchwork, like Lauren's doing, Sway is doing in Los Angeles, or Eileen Fisher's been doing it? Or is it secondhand? Are you purchasing it from somebody else? Are you taking the clothets to where clothing goes to die, basically? I mean, and so are you taking those clothes, and then repurposing them to others so that they could be used, so forth? I mean, these are all things you can do, that are individual things. Really, they really are. They're not so much in a collective sense, but the collective sense is to stop evaluating each other by how current your outer where is, oh, it's very current, At the same time, I want to say something about fashion, though. I think fashion is really beautiful, and it was art, and it still is art. So it's not like, oh, we're all dressed in denim and look like, the Chinese communists, in the 1960s, no. The clothing is about beauty. It's about, human beings have always adorned themselves and tried to express themselves with vegetable dyes, with marks, with jewelry, with clothing, etc. That is a beautiful, beautiful part of humanity. And so we're not talking about like being all dressed, like I said, in sackcloth. It's like, oh, okay, we're saving the environment. No, we're talking about how to be truly humane and express our humanity in how we dress and what we buy.
Yeah, I love fashion and I'm never going to stop loving it. But I do think that, and I've noticed a lot that the different companies in the fashion industry are becoming B Corps and they're doing more and they're being more mindful. And I think you're going to be seeing more change in that industry. Definitely. I
Yeah.
want to know more about you, Paul. Can
Would
you
you like
tell me a
to?
little bit about how did you even get into this? Like, how did this happen? How did you become the key speaker? I know you wrote the book Drawdown too, which was a huge success and an incredible book. And I've not only read that book, but I've also seen movies inspired by that book. Um, and this book, and I want to just kind of hear a little bit about your life. Like, how did this happen? How did you get into this? And what's your hope?
I wonder myself sometimes, but I know there's some, somebody asked me a question, not so long ago, a couple years ago, and I forget the question actually, but I remember the answer. It's interesting, like, because I said something I hadn't ever said before. And what I said was that when I grew up, it was unsafe to be inside my home. It was not a safe place, and so I would go outside as much as possible. And outside, I felt safe. I still do to this day. And but inside your home, if you're a child, and I was a child then, you can master the inside of a home in an hour. I mean, light switches, the TV, we didn't have one then, but TV, the refrigerator, the toilet, the toilet paper. I mean, your bed, I mean, what's there to know? Usually I play piano, so there's the piano, but I mean, there's nothing to master really, when you go outside, which I did, you don't know where you are. You don't know what's happening. You don't know the names of things. You don't know the source of the sounds you're hearing, or if they are a bird sound, what bird is it? Why is it making that sound? You don't know which ripe red things are edible or poisonous. We don't know the name of plants. You don't know when you pick up a rock what's crawling away. You don't know why the lizard is bouncing up and down when it looks at you, and why it looks like a dinosaur, and all these things arise, and so I developed curiosity really, and it didn't develop inside, and I don't think you really develop curiosity today in the same way, with the screen. It's just not the same, And the thing is, you could spend 10 lifetimes outside and not know what's going on. You know a lot, but you wouldn't know everything because it's vastly intricate and complex and mysterious. And, the greatest scientists in the world today are discovering things that are just gobsmacking. You're like, really? I mean, Suzanne Sumard, in British Columbia, was the daughter of foresters, but they were, mule foresters. That is, they would cut a tree and then they would drag the tree out using mules to a road, and then they'd pick up that log and take it to a mill, but they didn't clear cut or anything like that. And, she was the one who did these studies, for in graduate school about forests, where she had this hunch that forests were communities as opposed to plants. They were competing with each other for light and water and nutrients. And so she injected carbon-14, which is a very rare form of carbon, into she called the mother tree later, but these big trees that were obviously central to a large area of the forest and so forth. And then her students then measured how quickly that carbon-14 showed up in other trees and other plants. It was like, whoa, it couldn't have got there from any other source from that one tree, the mother tree. And so really was the one who discovered that trees are communities, and they're communicating, and they're donating water and carbon and sugar, and even signals to each other about moths or infestations, and change the composition of your leaves or your, accordingly, because this has come into the forest and so forth. So they're acting collaboratively. I mean, in a sense, regeneration is like, can we be as smart as a forest? Can we cooperate, collaborate? Can we work together? Yeah, well, every forest is. Why not us too? And so this understanding is even more amplified by the work the Italians did, Monica Gagliano and some others, about plant perception and plant intelligence. Now that's an idea that botanists, have just eschewed for a long time. Like, don't talk to me about plants being intelligent, wouldn't hear of it, which is a really big bias, because we discovered that, the plants have all 5 senses that we have, all 5 senses, and they have 15 more we don't have. It's like, what? And so it's almost a figure ground reversal. We think, oh, we're so smart, and they're just standing there, and they can't even move, because they can't move. They're called sessile. We're mobile. They're sessile. They have created abilities, if you will, capabilities, to survive, and they've been here a lot longer than us. And so what we're seeing now, and this is animal communication too. I mean, animal perception. We just discovered, or papers published about ravens, that they can do logical thinking. And we know that corvids, that family of crows and ravens, can actually remember, say, your face. They see your face, and they can, if you did something that was harmful to a family, a nest, or a corvid family, a crow family, and then everybody who saw you do that is dead, that family is dead, they can pass on the memory of your face to their progeny. And so when they see your face, they go, oh, wow, and they'll start to dive bomb you. I mean, that's crazy. And so, that's, for me, it was about being curious, and trying to figure out what the heck is going on out there, because I wasn't so happy what was going on inside my home, frankly, I mean, and I'm not asking people to feel sorry for me, don't. I mean, I was lucky in that sense, that I found a greater source of interest in humanity, if in the broadest sense of the word, because I included not humanity, but maybe of life, let's call it life, than I was finding inside. And nothing in nature is neurotic, and nature never makes a mistake, and so you're in a relationship with something that is quite different, than the human-made world. And so I think that had a big influence. And so the thing about my books that I've written, we talked about 8 or 9, I'm not sure, but each one is actually a way for me to learn, as opposed to, I know you, don't listen up. That's not what I do. I don't know. Let's figure this out together, kind of thing, or let me figure it out as best I can, and let me share it with you in a way that maybe is, that you want to read, you want to turn the page, and if somebody asked me what made a great book, and I said, a great book is a book you want to turn the page. Next question. If you don't turn the page, it's not a great book.
But that is a great soundbite. A great book is one where you want to turn the page. It really is that simple.
Yeah.
Definitely Regeneration was a great book, because I definitely wanted to turn the page, even though I was listening to it on Audible.
I had a friend, a Texan. I had a friend, I'll tell you about it. He's a ghostwriter. He's very good. He writes for very famous people, and he would call me all the time about what books we were reading, and he would call me and really Texas drawl, Paul, y'all read, I forget what the book was, such and such. And I said, yeah, I tried to. I said, I really couldn't get into it. He said, yeah. He said, it had a stop sign at the end of every sentence. So yeah, writing writing is really about honoring the reader, you know.
When we talk about regeneration, is your biggest hope that people will then finish the book, go on the website, look at all the different ways that they can make an impact collectively and do that? Or what is your hope for that book? What is your hope?
Actually, the book is, I call it a neurotransmitter. The last 8 pages, called Action and Connection, is like a wormhole to the website. The website is not even is growing and connecting in ways that isn't even remotely complete yet. What we're trying to do is break down the silo of a website. You know, I mean, you go to these NGO, you know, really great websites, and you have a drone shot of paradise, you know, or some river or some mountain, and, you know, and then this is what we do, and send us money and all that sort of stuff, which I do, by the way. I think organizations are doing a great thing there. What we're trying to do is connect the regenerative movement to itself, you know, and I say in the book, the way you heal a system is to connect more of it to itself. So our aspiration has to do with creating the means and wherewithal that people can connect to themselves, in a sense, their own sensibility, but also find something that makes sense to them in terms of what they can do. If you go down to the bottom, or go to the very bottom, and you go to of the website, not Nexus, but and you go to Cascade, or maybe just go to the menu over there to the right, upper right, there, the 3 lines. See the 3 lines on the right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, go there, and now go to Cascade of Solutions on the bottom left. Bottom, yeah, there. Okay, and click that. And and then you can scroll down this one and so forth. It is a cascade, and these are quotes from the book and so forth, you know. And it says, if we want to get attention from humanity, humanity has to feel it's getting attention. We'll get back to that. But these are the solutions in context, and not all the solutions and so forth. And they start from glaciers and mountains and ice and rivers, and, you know, go into Regen Ag, and then to the city, you know. And if you stop right there, stop right there, but just down below, and go to there's a singer there, you know, and see Regeneration Anthem. And so
I'm going to click that.
yeah, click it, and then click the video preview. Okay, and then
Good.
yeah, and this is and the sound will go on a minute. Just, it has a little pause there. This is A.Y. Young.
Yo, dude, I've been reading this book called The Regeneration, and it's by this dude named Paul Hawken. And like, you know, it's all about like regeneration's like kind of like recreating all that was lost, you know, and how like humans and nature, we have to come together, right? To like power, like change and make this happen. And so I made a song. Like I could be like the actual the anthem. Let me show you, man. I'll show you the song really quick on here real fast. Oh, yo, this is the battery to it, bro. Like, you know, I actually power this. Well, this is solar, and I store energy in batteries, and that's why it's called the battery tour. And I use it to power all my concerts. I also made the whole album, all this music I'm making, off of renewable energy, off of this thing. So here, let me show you, dude. I'll just like walk you through the record, because like you got to really feel the lyrics and stuff. And it's all about changing the world, right? And if anyone's listening, they just, you know, just survive, you know what I'm saying? You feel me, bro? You know? We can't make our minds up, we gotta come together. I can't find the reasons not to give up.
The sound isn't right now somehow. I don't know what's going on with the sound. Anyway, you can stop now, but because you can't hear it right properly, or I don't think your viewers can hear it. But the point being is that I think that the climate movement, to be successful, has to be a joyful expression of purpose. And AY is a friend. He's so joyful. If you go onto the website and then click on it and see the YouTube presentation, I mean, And that song has been picked up by Darren Olin and Zac Efron for the season 2 of Down to Earth on Netflix and so forth. They saw it here and said, "Hey, we want that song," and so forth. But we have to understand that the problem is absolutely serious. I mean, get out of here and so forth. But then accept that as it is, and then really move to I think like Wendell Berry said, be joyous though you have considered all the facts, like, got it. Wow, the science is incredible, amazing, and we're in trouble. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what are we going to do? And it's really about action, doing, connecting, in a meaningful way. And AY sang that song 4 or 5 days ago in Rome to 50,000 people,
Wow.
I mean, he was invited there by the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, for whom he made a song for them as well, and so forth. So, this is, rather than our obligation, something we do out of guilt, something we do if we're out of fear. Reversing global warming, addressing the climate crisis is actually an offering. It's a gift to us, because if we look at ourselves as the objects of the sentence, this is happening to us, and dang, it's messing up my ideas and messing up my plans and messing up what I want. And, I'm so unfortunate to be born at this time. And gosh, that is crazy. We are the subject of every sentence. We are the subject of our life. And the fact is that this is happening for us, not to us. And, we're being homeschooled by the planet. It is gentle, it is kind, it is compassionate. She, it, whatever pronoun you want to use and so forth. But the point is that, and if we actually look at it from that point of view, it's requesting, asking, teaching that we align ourselves with life itself. And that's really, really our deepest impulse as life itself, as human beings and so forth. That is when we are at our best. That is when we're at the very core of our being, because regeneration is innate to being a human being. I mean, when you care for anything, any people, and your children, your family, your friends, your others who are less fortunate, whatever, all the time you express care. That's regeneration. That's what you're doing. That's regeneration. So regeneration isn't some idea that Paul Hawken said, oh, we should regenerate the world. No, that's what the world does. Nature regenerates itself all the time. As soon as we stop poisoning it or cutting it or, burning it or scraping it and so forth, it automatically goes back to regeneration and so forth. The planet is fine. I mean, are we trashing it? Yes. But it will survive. It's been here 4 billion years. It's going to do fine without us and so forth. The question is, can we interact with it in such a way that we can regenerate ourselves, our own society, our culture, this civilization, in a way that we're in alignment? And what nature does is creates more life. It keeps creating more life. And what keystone species do was create more life than their own life. That is to say, beavers do it, bees do it, hummingbirds do it, people can do it too. Indigenous people did it for tens and tens of thousands of years. They acted with their environment in such a way that it created more for future generations. And so that's what the planet is asking us to do. That's what regeneration is about. And it's not about me or us or it telling you what to do, or no, it's about you discovering what it is that brings you to life. Because when you bring the planet to life, when you regenerate the world, you bring yourself back to life.